She led him through corridors that seemed to bend in ways that shouldn't be possible, past rooms where Krellthorax caught glimpses of technology that made his head hurt to look at. Finally, they arrived at what appeared to be an observation deck. The view was stunning, the entire human fleet spread out before them, with Earth visible in the distance, blue and beautiful and utterly oblivious to the storm about to break over it. 72 hours to prevent a war. 72 hours to save billions of lives. 72 hours to prove that diplomacy could still work in a galaxy that had forgotten what humanity was capable of. Krellthorax wasted the first 30 seconds in stunned silence. Then, because he was a professional and professionals didn't have the luxury of falling apart, he got to work. Harmony. I need direct channels to High Chancellor Vornathus and to the Vryn colonial governor on Earth. Also, get me Admiral Threxavan and the Third Fleet. I need everyone working on this simultaneously. Establishing connections now, Ambassador. Also, sir, I'm detecting significant activity from the human fleet. They're deploying what appear to be sensor platforms throughout the Sol system. Whatever they're planning, they're making sure they'll see anything coming. Of course they were. Krellthorax pulled up the tactical display and studied the human deployment pattern. It was masterful, really. Whoever had designed this blockade understood both defensive and offensive warfare at a level that most Concordance military academies would consider paranoid. Every angle was covered, every approach monitored, every potential weakness protected. This wasn't the work of a species that had gotten lucky. This was the result of 3,000 years of hard-won experience. The holographic displays flickered to life, showing the concerned faces of the High Chancellor, the panicked expression of Governor Shelvax of the Vryn colony, and the stoic demeanor of Admiral Threxavan. All three began talking at once. Ambassador, what is the situation? Complete evacuation is impossible in 72 hours. We have 3 billion people. Third Fleet is ready to engage. But Ambassador, I must warn you, everyone stop. Krellthorax rarely raised his voice, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I need each of you to listen very carefully, because I'm only going to explain this once, and we don't have time for arguments. High Chancellor, the humans are serious. This isn't a negotiating tactic. This is a line in the sand drawn by a species that spent 3,000 years learning how to survive in conditions that would kill the rest of us in seconds. Governor, we need to begin evacuations immediately, but we also need to be smart about this. Admiral, under no circumstances are you to engage unless I give the explicit order. Is all of that clear? 3 sets of eyes stared back at him, and then, one by one, they nodded. Good. At least he still had that much authority. Governor Shelvax, how many people can you realistically evacuate in 72 hours? The governor's eye stalks drooped, a sign of despair in Vryn body language. If we use every transport, every shuttle, every ship that can break atmosphere, maybe to million, maybe that leads to billion. 998 million people with nowhere to go. Krellthorax felt his stomach drop, but he pushed forward. Then that's what we evacuate. Prioritize families with young children, the elderly, anyone who can't defend themselves if this turns violent. Make it voluntary but strongly encouraged. Tell people the truth, there's a potential crisis situation, and we're taking precautions. Don't cause a panic, but don't lie to them either. Understood, Ambassador, Admiral Threxavan. What's your assessment of the human fleet's capabilities? The Admiral's scales darkened, which in his species meant deep concern. Ambassador, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. If it comes to a fight, we lose. My analysts have been studying their ships, and the technology they're displaying is at least 500 years more advanced than anything in the Concordance arsenal. Their energy signatures suggest they're using power sources that shouldn't be possible. Their weapons have targeting solutions that update faster than our computers can track, and their ships move like they're alive, like they're thinking and adapting in real time. If we fight, we die. It's that simple. Then we don't fight, Krellthorax said firmly. We negotiate. Ambassador, you already tried that. No. I tried talking to them through a communications channel. I need to be there, face to face. I need them to see me, to remember that we're not just voices on a screen, we're people. Just like they are. High Chancellor, I'm requesting permission to board the human flagship and attempt direct negotiations. Vornathus pulsed through several colors before responding. That's extremely dangerous, Ambassador. We have no idea what humanity has become. You could be walking into a trap, or worse. With respect, High Chancellor, everything at this point is dangerous. We're looking at a war that could destabilize the entire concordance. If there's even a chance that direct negotiations can prevent that, I have to take it. Very well. You have my authorization. And Ambassador, good luck. I have a feeling we're all going to need it. The channel's closed. And Krellthorax turned to Harmony. All right, get me that channel to the human flagship again. And this time, I'm not asking permission. The communication channel crackled to life. And Krellthorax didn't wait for them to speak first. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Krellthorax. I'm requesting permission to come aboard your flagship. I want to talk, face to face. You owe me that much. There was a long pause. Long enough that Krellthorax began to wonder if they were simply going to ignore him. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned, and there was something in it that might have been amusement. You've got guts, Ambassador. I'll give you that. Most species would be running right now. Instead, you want to climb into the belly of the beast. All right, you can come aboard. But Ambassador, I need you to understand something. What you're about to see, what we've become, it's going to change how you view humanity forever. And not necessarily in a good way. Are you sure you want that? Krellthorax thought about the billions of lives hanging in the balance. He thought about the galaxy teetering on the edge of war. He thought about his duty as a diplomat, as someone who had sworn to build bridges between species no matter how wide the gap. I'm sure. Then dock with the Indomitables Bay 3. And Ambassador, come unarmed. We've seen too much treachery in the void to take chances. The channel closed. And Krellthorax piloted the Harmony's light toward the massive human flagship. As he got closer, he could see the details that the long-range sensors had missed. The hull was covered in scars, not damage, exactly, but marks that looked like they had been earned. Some were burn patterns that suggested energy weapons, but others were stranger, looking almost like claw marks or acid scoring. Whatever battles these ships had fought, they hadn't been against conventional enemies. The docking procedure was smooth, almost too smooth, as if the human ship's systems had anticipated his every move before he made it. As the airlock cycled, Krellthorax took a moment to compose himself. He was about to meet humans who had survived the impossible, humans who had spent 3,000 years in a place that existed outside normal reality, humans who might not even be entirely human anymore. The airlock opened, and Krellthorax stepped through into a corridor that was both familiar and utterly alien. The basic layout was similar to human ships from 3,000 years ago, functional, efficient, slightly cramped by the standards of species that preferred more space. But the walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The lighting had an odd quality, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And there, waiting for him, was Admiral Sarah Chen. She was tall, even for a human, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the universe and decided it wasn't impressive enough. She wore a uniform that was clearly military, but designed in a way that no human military from 3,000 years ago would have recognized. It was black, form-fitting, and covered in those same strange symbols that adorned the walls. Behind her stood two guards, equally imposing, carrying weapons that Krellthorax couldn't begin to identify. Ambassador Krellthorax, she said, extending her hand in the ancient human gesture of greeting. Welcome to the Indomitable. I'd say welcome home, but I suspect you don't think of this as your home. Krellthorax took her hand, noting the strength in her grip. Thank you for seeing me, Admiral. I know you have no reason to trust the Concordance after what happened. What happened? Chen's laugh was bitter. Ambassador, the Concordance didn't make the void open. You didn't send us there, but you did seal it behind us. You did declare us extinct. You did give our worlds to other species and move on like we never existed. So no, I don't trust the Concordance, but I respect courage when I see it, and coming here took courage. So let's talk. Follow me. Beautiful, isn't it? Chen said softly. 3,000 years, and it hasn't changed. Same oceans, same continents, same moon. Everything else in the universe went to hell, but Earth stayed the same. Do you have any idea what that means to us, Ambassador? I think I'm beginning to understand. No, you're not. You can't, not really. Chen turned to face him, and her eyes were hard. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. Let me tell you what the void was like. Maybe then you'll understand why we're here. Why we can't compromise. Why we won't. She walked to the observation window and placed her hand against it, as if reaching for the planet below. When the void opened, we didn't know what was happening. One moment, we were a species spread across 30 star systems, building, growing, dreaming. The next, we were falling through the cracks in reality. The first year, we lost 90% of our population. Not to war, not to disease, but to things that don't have names in any language spoken in this dimension. Things that existed in spaces between spaces. Things that saw us as either food or toys or both. Krellthorax felt his scales prickle with horror. But Chen wasn't done. The ones who survived, we learned fast. We learned that the rules we'd always relied on didn't apply anymore. Physics was negotiable. Time was relative. Death was temporary if you knew the right tricks, and permanent if you didn't. We built ships that could navigate through dimensions that shouldn't exist. We developed weapons that could hurt things that had no physical form. We made alliances with entities that would drive your species insane just from looking at them. And we survived. She turned back to face him, and Krellthorax saw something in her eyes that terrified him. It wasn't madness exactly. It was the look of someone who had stared into the abyss so long that the abyss had stared back, shrugged, and decided to leave them alone because they were more trouble than they were worth. For 3,000 years, Ambassador, we fought. We lost worlds, fleets, entire generations. But we kept fighting because we had something that the Void's inhabitants didn't understand. We had hope. Hope that someday, somehow, we'd find our way home. And we held onto that hope through battles that would make your worst wars look like children playing with sticks. Then one day, about 5 years ago by our reckoning, though time gets weird in the Void. So who knows how long it really was, we found something. A crack, a weakness in the barrier between the Void and normal space. It took us for years to widen it, to create a path that our ships could use. 4 years of holding off attacks from things that wanted to use that same crack, to break into your reality. 4 years of sacrificing fleets to buy time for the rest of us to escape. And finally, we made it. We came home. Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Do you know what we found, Ambassador? We found that the galaxy had moved on. Our worlds were occupied. Our history was being taught as a cautionary tale. Our very existence was treated as a tragic footnote in galactic history. And Earth, our Earth, the world where humanity was born, was home to 3 billion aliens who had no idea that we were still alive. I understand your anger. Krellthorax began. But Chen cut him off. No, you don't. You understand the concept of anger, but you don't understand what it's like to fight your way through literal hell, to lose everything except the hope of coming home, and then to find that home has been given away to someone else. You don't understand what it's like to have your entire species written off as extinct, when you spent every waking moment for 3,000 years proving that you weren't dead. You were just someplace else. Then help me understand, Krellthorax pleaded. Help me find a way to make this right without bloodshed. There has to be a middle ground. The people living on Earth now, they're not your enemies. They didn't know. They couldn't have known. You're right. They're not our enemies. They're just in our way. Chen sighed, and for a moment, she looked incredibly tired. Ambassador, I don't want a war. None of us do. We've had enough war to last a dozen lifetimes. But we're not negotiating on this. Earth is ours. It always has been. And it always will be. The people living there now have 72 hours to leave. After that, we're taking our planet back, and anyone who tries to stop us is going to learn why the things in the Void eventually decided to let us leave rather than keep fighting us. What if they can't all evacuate in time? What if there are people who have nowhere else to go? Then they'll die. Chen's voice was flat, matter of fact. I don't say that because I want it to happen. I say it because that's the reality of the situation. We've given them 72 hours, which is 72 hours more than the Void ever gave us. That's not cruelty, Ambassador. That's mercy by our standards. Krellthorax felt something snap inside him. All his training, all his diplomatic experience, all his carefully cultivated patience evaporated in a moment of pure frustration. This isn't mercy. This is genocide. You're talking about killing billions of innocent people because you can't let go of the past. Yes, what happened to you was terrible. Yes, you suffered in ways I can't imagine. But that doesn't give you the right to inflict that same suffering on others. The two guards moved forward, their weapons coming up, but Chen held up a hand to stop them. She looked at Krellthorax with something that might have been respect. There it is. That's the fire I was looking for. Good, you care. That's more than I can say for most bureaucrats. She turned back to the window, her reflection ghostly in the transparent material. You want to know the truth, Ambassador? The real truth. We're scared. Every single one of us. We spent 3,000 years in the void, and it changed us in ways that we're still discovering. Some of us can see things that exist outside normal space. Some of us can manipulate reality in small ways. Some of us don't dream anymore because our nightmares became real a long time ago. And now they just live in the back of our heads where we can't escape them. Her voice cracked, just slightly. We need Earth, Ambassador. Not just because it's our home, not just because of pride or revenge or any of that. We need it because it's the one constant, the one thing that didn't change. We need solid ground under our feet, real air to breathe, gravity that doesn't shift based on what dimension you're currently occupying. We need to remember what it's like to be human again. And we can't do that on some random colony world that smells wrong and feels wrong, and doesn't have the graves of our ancestors. She turned back to him, and for the first time, Krellthorax saw past the Admiral, past the warrior to the person underneath. She looked old, impossibly old, despite whatever medical technology had kept her physically young. So here's what I'm willing to offer. It's more than I should, more than my crew would probably agree to. But I'm going to offer it anyway because you came here in good faith. We'll extend the deadline to 1 week. That's 7 full days for evacuations. We'll provide transport ships to help move people faster. And we'll work with the concordants to find suitable relocation worlds for the displaced populations. But in 1 week, Ambassador, Earth becomes human territory again. That's not negotiable. That's not changing. That's the line. Krellthorax's mind raced. A week instead of 72 hours. Transport assistance. Relocation support. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than mass slaughter. It was something he could work with. And what about after? What about humanity's place in the concordance? Are you planning to rejoin us, or are you going to isolate yourselves? Chen laughed, but this time there was actual humor in it. Ambassador, we never left the concordance. You just didn't know where we were. As for the future, that depends on how the next week goes. If the concordance is willing to accept that humanity is back, that we're different now but still deserve a seat at the table, then maybe we can rebuild what we had. If not, then we'll go our own way. But either way, we're not disappearing again. The galaxy is going to have to deal with the fact that we're here, and we're not leaving. I need to talk to my government. I need authorization to make this agreement official. Of course, use whatever communications you need. But Ambassador, make them understand something. This offer has a shelf life. If I start getting reports of Concordance military buildup, if I see any indication that someone is planning to try to stop us by force, then the deal is off and we go back to the 70 to our deadline. We've seen every trick, every tactic, every betrayal that sentient beings can come up with. We're not falling for anything. Clear? Crystal clear. Chen nodded to one of the guards, who stepped forward with a small device. This is a communication relay. It'll let you talk directly to me, bypassing any concordance channels that might misinterpret what's happening. Use it if you need to reach me quickly. Krellthorax took the device, noting its alien design. Thank you, Admiral. I know this doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. Maybe. Or maybe it's just delaying the inevitable. But I'm willing to try, for what it's worth. She extended her hand again, and Krellthorax shook it. 1 week, Ambassador. Make it count. The trip back to the Harmony's light passed in a blur. Krellthorax's mind was already working on the diplomatic framework, the logistics, the 1,000 details that would need to be addressed. As soon as he was back aboard his ship, he opened channels to everyone who mattered. The next 6 days were the most intense of Krelthorax's life. He coordinated between human forces and Concordance authorities, mediating disputes, solving problems, and preventing at least 3 separate incidents that could have spiraled into violence. The evacuation proceeded faster than anyone had predicted, helped by the human transport ships that proved to be far more efficient than anything in the Concordance fleet. Governor Shelvax, to his credit, managed the impossible task of evacuating nearly all of Earth's population without causing a panic. The Vrin, it turned out, were remarkably pragmatic when faced with the alternative of fighting a species that had survived the void for 3,000 years. Other species followed suit, packing up their belongings and leaving the planet that many had called home for generations. There were moments of beauty among the chaos. Krelthorax witnessed human soldiers helping elderly Vrin carry their possessions to transport ships. He saw children of different species playing together one last time before their families departed. He watched as historians from both sides worked together to preserve records and artifacts, ensuring that the last 3,000 years of Earth's history wouldn't be lost. But there were also moments of tragedy, people who refused to leave, clinging to homes they'd built over lifetimes, families separated by the chaos of evacuation. The sheer scale of displacement, the uprooting of billions of lives, weighed on everyone involved. On the 6th day, Krelthorax received a message from Admiral Chen, asking him to return to the Indomitable one final time. He found her in the same observation deck, looking out at Earth, which was now almost empty of its non-human population. "Ambassador, thank you for everything you've done this week. I know it wasn't easy. It was necessary. Though I'll admit, there were moments when I wasn't sure we'd make it work. But we did. That's what matters." Chen pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's surface. Cities that had been teeming with life a week ago now stood quiet, waiting. "Tomorrow, we go home. Our shuttles are already prepped. 50 million humans, ready to set foot on Earth for the first time in 3,000 years. Most of them were born in the void. They've never known real sunlight, real wind, real rain. Tomorrow, they will. What about the Concordance? What about your place in galactic society?" Chen smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "We've been talking with High Chancellor Vornathus. Humanity is being officially reinstated as a member species of the Concordance. With full voting rights and representation, we'll maintain our own military forces. But we've agreed to work within the Concordance framework for interspecies disputes. We're also setting up what we're calling the Void Research Initiative. Some of our scientists think they can help the Concordance develop better defensive technologies based on what we learned in there. That's incredible. I didn't think it would happen this fast. It almost didn't. There are still a lot of species that are nervous about us. Can't say I blame them. We're dangerous, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. But we're also willing to be part of the galactic community again. On our terms, yes, but still part of it." Krelthorax nodded, feeling something he hadn't felt in days: hope. "What happens now? Now we rebuild. We reconnect with who we used to be, while accepting who we've become. We mourn the lost, celebrate the survivors, and try to figure out how to live in a galaxy that thought we were dead." Chen turned to face him, "And we remember that we have allies, people like you, who risked everything to find a peaceful solution, when they could have just written us off as monsters. Thank you, Ambassador, for seeing us as people, even when we weren't making it easy. You are people. You're just people who've been through something that would have destroyed most species. The fact that you survived says something important about humanity." "Yeah?" Chen's smile turned wry. "What's that? That you're exactly as stubborn, resourceful, and impossible to kill as your reputation suggested. The galaxy is going to have to get used to that all over again." Chen laughed. A real laugh this time. "Ambassador, I think that's the nicest thing anyone said to us since we got back. Come on, let's get you back to your ship. You've got a report to file, and I've got a homecoming to plan." As Krelthorax departed the Indomitable for the last time, he looked back at the massive human fleet. Tomorrow, they would descend to Earth, and a new chapter in galactic history would begin. It wouldn't be easy, There would be tensions, disputes, moments when old fears and new suspicions threatened to tear everything apart. But it would be possible, because both sides had proven that they could work together when it mattered. The galaxy had trembled when humanity returned from the void, but it hadn't shattered. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real victory. 3 months later, Krelthorax stood in the newly reopened human embassy on Concordance Prime, attending a ceremony marking humanity's official return to galactic society. Admiral Chen was there, now also holding the title of ambassador, representing her species in their first formal diplomatic function in 3,000 years. "You know," Chen said to him quietly, as speeches were made and dignitaries congratulated each other on averting catastrophe, "my science team found something interesting. Those cracks in the barrier between the void and normal space, they're not natural. Something made them. Something on this side deliberately opened a door to the void 3,000 years ago." Krelthorax felt his blood run cold. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that humanity didn't accidentally stumble into the void. Someone pushed us. And whoever did it is still out there, somewhere in the Concordance." Chen's eyes were hard. "We're going to find out who, and when we do, they're going to learn that you don't mess with humanity. Not anymore, not ever again." She smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just caught the scent of prey. The galaxy had thought humanity's return was the end of the story. But as Krelthorax looked into Admiral Chen's eyes, he realized with a mixture of excitement and terror that it was only the beginning. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the Concordance, someone who thought they'd gotten away with the perfect crime 3,000 years ago had just made the worst mistake of their lives. They'd made humanity angry, and as the entire galaxy was about to learn, angry humans were the most dangerous force in the universe. 6 months after humanity's return, the truth would finally come to light, and the galaxy would never be the same. Krelthorax had thought the hard part was over. He'd been wrong before, but never quite this spectacularly wrong. The summons came at 3 in the morning, station time. An encrypted message from Admiral Chen, marked with priority codes that made his communication console practically scream for attention. The message was brief. "We found something. Come to Earth immediately. Tell no one. Trust no one. 40 minutes. Later, Krelthorax was aboard the Harmony's light, jumping toward the Sol system with a sense of dread that made his scales itch. In 6 months, humanity had settled back into Earth with surprising efficiency. Cities were being rebuilt, forests were being restored, and the planet was slowly transforming back into the home world that humanity remembered. But beneath that peaceful surface, Krelthorax knew that human intelligence agencies had been working tirelessly, following the trail of whoever had condemned them to 3,000 years in the void. Apparently, they'd found the end of that trail. Earth's orbital space was far more crowded now than it had been during the evacuation. Human ships patrolled in formations that spoke of constant vigilance, while construction platforms worked on what looked like defensive installations that made even Concordance military analysts nervous. The humans weren't just back, they were fortifying, preparing for a threat that the rest of the galaxy didn't yet understand. Admiral Chen met him at the same docking bay, where they'd first spoken face to face, but this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a man in civilian clothes who radiated an intensity that made Krelthorax's diplomatic instincts scream warnings. This was someone dangerous, someone who operated in shadows and knew things that most people were better off not knowing. "Ambassador," Chen said, her voice tight, "this is Director Marcus Webb, Head of Human Intelligence Services. Director, this is Ambassador Krelthorax, the person who helped us avoid a war 6 months ago." Webb nodded curtly. "Ambassador, thank you for coming quickly. What we're about to show you is classified at the highest levels of human government. If what we suspect is true, it's going to shake the Concordance to its foundation. Are you prepared for that?" Krelthorax thought about his duty, about his oath to seek truth and maintain peace. He thought about the billions of lives that hung in the balance every time major galactic powers disagreed. Most of all, he thought about the fact that someone had deliberately tried to exterminate humanity, and that kind of evil couldn't be allowed to go unpunished. "Show me." They led him deep into a facility that had been built beneath what used to be the human capital, city of Geneva. The elevator descended for what felt like miles, past security checkpoints that scanned him in ways he couldn't even identify. Finally, they arrived at a chamber that was part laboratory, part war room, with holographic displays covering every wall. 6 months ago, Webb began, pulling up a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. We started investigating the void incursion. Our scientists analyzed the dimensional barriers, the energy signatures, everything we could find about how the void opened in the first place. What we found was disturbing. The display zoomed in on a specific region of space, near where the void breach had originally occurred. The void doesn't just open randomly. It requires a specific set of conditions, including the precise manipulation of dimensional frequencies using technology that shouldn't exist. 3,000 years ago, someone created a device that could tear open reality and pushed humanity through. Krelthorax felt his stomach drop. You're certain it was deliberate? Completely. But that's not the worst part. Webb pulled up a new display, showing complex mathematical formulas that hurt to look at. We found residual energy signatures at the breach point. Our analysts spent months decoding them. When we finally cracked it, we found something interesting. The technology used to open the void, it wasn't human. It wasn't even close to human. But it was familiar. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her face grim. Ambassador, the technology that condemned humanity to 3,000 years in hell was concordance technology. Specifically, it matched the energy signatures of devices used by the Concordance Science Directorate. The words hit Krelthorax like a physical blow. The Science Directorate was one of the most respected institutions in the Concordance, responsible for technological advancement and research across all member species. The idea that they could be involved in something this monstrous was almost incomprehensible. That's impossible. The Directorate would never, wouldn't they? Webb's voice was cold. Think about it, Ambassador. 3,000 years ago, humanity was rising fast. Too fast, by some accounts. We were aggressive, expansionist, and we asked uncomfortable questions about how the galaxy really worked. We threatened the established order, and then, conveniently, we disappeared. The void opened, swallowed us whole, and the Concordance sealed it behind us without even trying to mount a rescue. They just let us go. Krelthorax wanted to argue, but the pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. He remembered the historical records, the debates in the Concordance Council about what to do about the human problem. Some species had been openly concerned about humanity's rapid expansion. Others had warned that humans were too unpredictable, too dangerous. But he'd always assumed those were just the normal growing pains of integrating a new species into galactic society. What if it had been more than that? What if someone had decided that the easiest solution to the human problem was to make it disappear entirely? Do you have proof? Krelthorax asked quietly. Solid evidence that would stand up to scrutiny? Webb smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Better, we have a confession. Show him. The holographic display shifted, showing a recording. An alien figure appeared, one that Krelthorax recognized immediately. It was of Vryn, elderly even by their long-lived standards, wearing the robes of the Science Directorate. But more than that, it was someone Krelthorax knew personally. Director Velshara, one of the most respected scientists in the Concordance, who had served on the Science Directorate for over 1,500 years. The recording showed Velshara in what appeared to be a private lab, speaking to someone off-camera. Her voice was clear, unmistakable. The human problem will be resolved within the month. The dimensional breach device is ready. Once activated, it will create a stable void incursion that will pull their entire species through. The beauty of it is that everyone will think it was an accident, a natural phenomenon that we couldn't prevent. By the time anyone thinks to question it, humanity will be gone, and we can finally proceed with the galactic development plans without their interference. The recording continued, showing Velshara discussing logistics, timelines, and contingencies. It was damning, comprehensive, and absolutely genuine. Krelthorax felt sick. How did you get this? He whispered. We have our ways, Webb said. Let's just say that spending 3,000 years in the void taught us some interesting tricks. about gathering information. But here's where it gets complicated, Ambassador. Valshara didn't act alone. She had support, funding, and authorization from somewhere high up in the Concordance power structure. We've been trying to trace the connections, but every lead we follow gets buried under layers of classified documents and convenient accidents. Admiral Chen placed a hand on Krelthorax's shoulder, a surprisingly gentle gesture from someone who had survived literal hell. Ambassador, we're bringing you this because we trust you. You proved 6 months ago that you're willing to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. We need your help to expose this conspiracy and bring everyone involved to justice. But we also need to do this carefully. If we just release this information, it could tear the Concordance apart. Species would take sides, old alliances would fracture, and we'd be looking at a galactic civil war. Krelthorax's mind was racing. This was bigger than anything he'd ever dealt with. This was a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of galactic government, involving the deliberate genocide of an entire species. The political implications were staggering, but beneath the fear and the uncertainty, he felt something else: anger, pure, righteous anger at the injustice of it all. What do you need from me? Webb pulled up another display, showing organizational charts of the Concordance government. We need someone on the inside who can navigate the political landscape, someone who can present this evidence to the right people without triggering a cover-up, someone who the Concordance still trusts. You want me to expose this conspiracy from within. We want you to help us bring them to justice, Chen corrected. The right way, through proper channels, with evidence that can't be disputed. We didn't survive 3,000 years in the void just to become the villains of our own story. Ambassador, we want justice, not revenge. Krelthorax looked at the evidence again, at the face of Director Valshara, someone he had respected and trusted. He thought about all the humans who had died in the void, all the families torn apart, all the suffering that could have been prevented if someone had just decided that wiping out an entire species was a step too far. He thought about his oath as a diplomat, to seek truth and maintain peace, and he realized that sometimes maintaining peace required exposing the lies that threatened to destroy it. I'll do it, but we do this my way. No shortcuts, no vigilante justice. We present the evidence to the Concordance Council, demand a full investigation, and let the judicial process work. Agreed, Chen said immediately. But Ambassador, we're going to need guarantees. If this goes wrong, if someone tries to bury this again, humanity needs to know that we have options. We're not going back to the void, and we're not disappearing quietly, understood? Give me 2 weeks. I'll arrange a special session of the council, present the evidence, and make sure there's no way to suppress it. But in return, I need you to promise me that humanity won't take unilateral action. No matter how this plays out, you let the justice system work. Webb and Chen exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. 2 weeks, Webb confirmed. After that, all bets are off. The next 14 days were the most politically delicate of Krelthorax's career. He reached out to old allies, calling in favors and building a coalition of species who would support a full investigation. He secured guarantees from the Concordance judiciary that any evidence presented would be handled by independent investigators. Most importantly, he ensured that the special council session would be broadcast across the entire Concordance, making it impossible to hide what was revealed. When the day finally came, the council chamber was packed with representatives from every member species. High Chancellor Vornathus called the session to order, his energy matrix pulsing with confused concern. Ambassador Krelthorax has requested this special session on a matter of urgent galactic importance. Ambassador, you have the floor. Krelthorax stood, feeling the weight of billions of eyes watching across the galaxy. This was it, the moment that would either bring justice or tear everything apart. Honored representatives, I come before you today with evidence of a crime so heinous, so devastating, that it strikes at the very heart of what the Concordance is supposed to represent. 3,000 years ago, humanity disappeared into the void. We were told it was a tragic accident, a natural phenomenon that we couldn't prevent. We were wrong. Humanity didn't fall into the void. They were pushed. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Krelthorax raised his hand for silence and continued. With the Council's permission, I will now present evidence provided by Human Intelligence Services, verified by independent concordance experts, showing that the Void incursion was deliberately created by members of the Science Directorate, with the explicit goal of eliminating humanity from the galaxy. For the next hour, Krelthorax presented everything: the recordings, the energy signatures, the mathematical proof that the Void breach couldn't have been natural. He showed Valshara as confession, played in full for the entire galaxy to hear. He traced the conspiracy, connecting threads that led to a cabal of influential figures who had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. When he finished, the silence in the chamber was absolute. Then, High Chancellor Vornathus spoke, his voice carrying a weight that Krelthorax had never heard before. This council is horrified beyond words at what has been revealed here today. If these allegations are proven true, they represent the greatest crime in concordance history. I am hereby ordering the immediate arrest of all individuals named in this investigation, including Director Valshara. A full judicial inquiry will be convened, with representatives from all member species. And I want to say, here and now, before the entire galaxy, humanity, we failed you. We failed to protect you. We failed to rescue you, and worst of all, some among us actively sought your destruction. On behalf of the Concordance, I offer our deepest apologies. It is not enough, it will never be enough, but it is all we can offer besides our commitment to justice. In the gallery reserved for observers, Admiral Chen stood watching. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply nodded once, acknowledging that the first step toward justice had been taken. The trials took 6 months. In that time, the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. Valshara and 17 other co-conspirators were found guilty of genocide, conspiracy, and crimes against sentient life. The sentences were severe exile to the Void itself. Let them experience firsthand what they had condemned humanity to endure. But more importantly, the Concordance underwent a fundamental reformation. New oversight committees were established. The Science Directorate was restructured from top to bottom, and humanity was given a permanent seat on the Concordance High Council, with veto power over any decisions that affected species survival. 1 year after humanity's return, Krelthorax stood on Earth's surface for the first time, attending a memorial ceremony for all the humans who hadn't survived the Void. Billions of names were being etched into a monument that stretched for miles, a permanent reminder of the cost of prejudice and fear. Admiral Chen found him there, standing before the endless list of the dead. You did good, Ambassador. You gave us justice when you could have just given us excuses. It was the least I could do. Though I know it doesn't bring back the people you lost, no. But it means they didn't die for nothing. It means the galaxy learned something from our suffering. Chen looked up at the sky, where human and concordance ships now patrolled together. You know what the funny thing is? We spent 3,000 years in the Void, fighting to survive, holding onto the hope that we'd come home. And now that we're here, now that we have justice, we realize something important. What's that? Home isn't just a place. It's a promise that you belong somewhere, that you're not alone, that someone will stand with you when things get dark. The Concordance broke that promise 3,000 years ago. But you, Ambassador, you helped rebuild it. Thank you for that. Krelthorax felt his eyes dampen, a rare show of emotion for his species. The galaxy is stronger with humanity in it. We should have realized that 3,000 years ago. I'm just glad we get a second chance to get it right. They stood together in silence, human and alien, watching the sun set over a world that had been lost and found again. The galaxy had trembled when humanity returned from the Void, but in the end, it hadn't shattered. It had transformed, becoming something better, something stronger. And in the sky above, visible even in daylight, was the Void Zone, still sealed, still dangerous. But now it was monitored by joint human concordance stations, ensuring that what had happened once would never happen again. The past couldn't be changed. The dead couldn't be brought back. But the future, that was still unwritten. And as Krelthorax looked at Admiral Chen, at the memorial behind them, and at the ships patrolling overhead, he realized that maybe, just maybe, that future would be brighter than anyone expected. Humanity had returned from the Void, They had sought justice, not revenge. They had chosen hope over hatred. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be human.